Well, the majority of it is probably going into grass. There might be a certain amount of it. They might grow up maize in it, but the majority of it is going into grass. Yeah, they might. If it's a very good field, look, it goes into maize. I'd say most of the time, but the majority of it goes into grass. Yeah.
It's been a difficult spring to get land work completed. There has been good progress, but there's still a substantial area to be planted. Contractors are at the sharp end of this busy period, with spring cropping and tasks connected with grassland all stacking up. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We would really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Contractors play a critical role in filling the gaps on most tillage farms, whether they're planting or harvesting, or all the way through the growing season. I'm delighted today to be joined by Padraig Nolan, who's based near Athy in Kildare, and Padraig Noonan, based near Conna in Cork, both who are contractors. Padraig, I might just start with you. You might just tell us a little bit about where you are and the type of contracting services you provide locally.
So we're based just outside Athy in County Kildare. We're traditionally more on your tillage side. So we perform gate services on tillage, be it min-till or plough, and every other need in between. But we also branch out into the rest of the contracting side with a little bit of baling and wrapping, baling straw, slurry and dung, and chicken litter and things like that.
Okay, are you involved in the grass side of it at all?
A little bit of baling and wrapping and a small bit of wagon silage, but we'd be very small in that in comparison to the rest of the outfit.
Okay, very good. And Padraig, you're down in Cork. You might maybe just give us a little bit of background, kind of where you are and the type of services you provide as well.
Yeah, well, we're from based in Conna, so it's just the Waterford side of Fermoy down here in Cork, and we provide basically full tillage service really, and silage as well, harvest of silage and reseeding. We cater for a lot for dairy farmers, the bit of beef as well, and there'd be cereal as well. But the dairy would have been maybe 50% of our business maybe 10 years ago, and now it's considerably more. It's up at around 70%, 75% of dairy would be our business, with tillage. The tillage side of it cutting back a small bit, with land being taken, more land going into dairy. Seems to be what's happening a small bit more down here.
Okay, we might come back to that a bit later, Padraig. But just in terms of the area that's left, I suppose, in terms of spring cereals, where do you think you are in terms of the work that you generally would be completing every year? Have you most of that done, off your books, or are you still a good bit to go?
Yeah, well, from the winter, past winter, there would have been only, I'd say 50% of the winter stuff that usually goes in gotten in, and I saw we had a backlog then of that as it was for the spring stuff. I suppose the one crop or the 3-crop rule being eradicated kind of simplified things a bit as well. Helped out a lot, because instead of a fella trying to fit in spring oats and spring wheat and spring barley, he was able to set all spring barley, which on my side of things would speed up things. And I suppose we're nearly finished. We're nearly finished the spring setting, to be honest. We got a very good run of weather, and we had a good team out, and they did well to get through a lot of work. When the soil was right, we were able to make a lot of headway.
And is there anything outstanding left there? Forage crops left, or is there pretty much everything done? Or do you plant the likes of beet and maize as well?
Yeah, well, so we just started setting maize there towards the end of last week before the weather broke. Maize under plastic is what we'd be setting at the start anyway. And that's it's a bit more time consuming now with this new type plastic. We're finding the output of the machine is back around 25% with this newer type plastic. So it's a bit harder to get through the work. But in general, we have probably like that 95%, like we have around 350 acres of maize to set under plastic, and we probably set another 100 acres without plastic. And it's hard to know. There's still a good bit of land not ploughed around the place, so it looks like that, you know, there probably will be more maize going in, and it's whether it goes in without plastic or with plastic.
Okay, expect more to come through. And
Yeah.
Patrick, going back to you in terms of the kind of similar kind of question, where are you in terms of the work that you expected to come through the door? Are you nearly finished, or are you halfway through, or kind of where are you?
I'm very envious of Paddy. He seems to be a lot further ahead than I am. In a very similar situation, we carried over a lot of work from the back end. We only got about 45-50% of the winter cereals in either. So we carried that and we gained work coming into the spring. But when the spring dragged out an awful lot, we're about halfway through that. But we've also lost probably 40%. So we've about 10% of what was estimated to be done left to be done. And that 40% now is headed for beet and maize, which we haven't even looked at yet up here. There is a few guys starting into it, but very few. Still very cold at night.
Okay, and the reason you reckon it was headed to beet and maize is because of lateness as much as anything else, or is there a demand for the forage, do you think, or what's the big shift?
It's lateness. It's the quoted prices there for barley in the harvest. It's the near guarantee of not making board malt spec. The shortness and the price of seed. Everyone is just very tight after coming out of a very bad year last year. And I really feel they don't have an appetite to go and sow cereals on a shoestring margin late.
Okay, so in terms of then the likes of, say, beans, Patrick, does it, in terms of the amount that was due to go in, is there similar or much less, do you think, in terms of what you're seeing or what you've completed yourself?
Towards last September, I would say they're about 45% up towards what farm plans would have been after the harvest. But that's a normal swing around this area. People do swing back and forth off beans very erratically around here.
Okay, so you think they're up by a good bit in your area?
Oh, they are, definitely.
Okay. And spring wheat was obviously the tricky one, I suppose, Patrick, in all areas in terms of the lateness of it. Did that go in at all, or is it most of that kind of remain unsown, do you think?
It wouldn't be a popular crop for me as a contractor or a farmer, and I don't know many guys sowing in the area, but I do know anyone that did sow it traditionally did sow it this year again, but I know of no new crops gone in.
Okay. And Padraig, down in Cork, in terms of the bean area for that you would normally see going in, has it changed? Has it gone up or down, or is your fellas still have beans to sow, do you think, or just maybe gone in over the last week?
Well, I suppose, yeah, the beans is lifted a small bit. I suppose that protein payment looks more attractive this year than it ever did. So there is a bit more of it gone in. I'd say maybe 15% more beans around the place. I suppose there was something you could drill there when the weather was only fair. You know, it's a big enough seed, and you'd get away with certain places to set it when you couldn't be setting anything else. So I'd say it'd be more that way, that there was a bit extra of it went in more than anything.
Okay. And would spring wheat be much of a crop down your area, or how do you think that fared in terms of the area?
Spring wheat, very little of it.
Okay.
Very little of it. What I did notice, I suppose, this year is that I have had extra from farmers growing grain for the fear of not having the straw. So
Okay.
that's what I've seen this year.
And just on that, actually, because you mentioned a bit of a loss to the dairy side of it. Are the dairy guys sowing in terms of taking on some of that land? Are they continuing to sow some cereals, or are they moved into just putting that back into grass?
Well, the majority of it is probably going into grass. There might be a certain amount of it. They might grow up maize in it. But the majority of it is going into grass. Yeah, they might, if it's a very good field. Look, it goes into maize, I'd say, most of the time. But the majority of it goes into grass. Yeah.
Okay. And just in terms, Padraig, of your the general system that you use, are you a plough in one pass, or have you got the option to use Mintill, or did you use that at all to try and get over the work?
Yeah, no, it is all plough. We have
Okay.
we find with the plough, I suppose, especially this year and even last year as well, like that, the ploughing, it seems to dry quicker when you plough it. And we do a lot of reseeding as well. And we have a big disc as well, but even with reseeding there now, this time of the year, and the same last year, we found that it takes too long for the ground to dry after disking it. Whereas any of the ground we ploughed, we were nearly, if it got half a good day or something, we were nearly able to get in on top of it after.
Okay. And do you think in that end of it, just in terms of that ploughed sided house, I know there was people were anxious to get going, and there was probably maybe dry on top, but maybe not quite, maybe perfect underneath. Was there much of that out there, do you think? Or because obviously spring barley is a pretty delicate crop in the sense of it likes everything to be right, I suppose, to get it
It
to get it
does, yeah.
going.
Well, I see there any of the early ploughing we did there in January, it was like the road nearly when we came to going setting it. So we grubbed our leveled, ring row leveled, I'd say 95% of the crops that we set. So it took a bit of extra work, all right, but look, it speeded up the drying of it, and the extra work that the grubber does in front of it takes a bit of pressure off the one pass as well. So your output is up as well in that. So
Okay, okay. And Patrick, you mentioned you have some Mintail stuff. Did you do any this spring, or was it purely a case of just trying to get it ploughed and get it in?
No, we found that we had a lot of wet land. Anything that was anywhere favourable was sowed in the back end. So a lot of guys panicked and got us to plough, and we seen the opportunity when there was ploughs out and we couldn't sow, we pushed out the Mintill as well. So we got the opportunity to get it kind of cultivated up, loosen it up, get a bit of air into it, and we could afford to walk away from it then for 3 or 4 days and get back to it. But now the percentage of Mintill would be down.
And obviously, Patrick, from that point of view, I mean, there was a lot of pressure on, and probably still is a good bit of pressure on, or maybe it's past, I don't know. But in terms of the pressure for planting, there's organic manures you were talking about. There's maybe a bit of baling on the horizon as well. How are you coping in terms of juggling those farmer demands out there?
And near impossible
Right.
because the workload was so high. Like we had 9 months worth of work backlogged, and there's no way of doing that in what we got 9 days of fine weather.
Mm.
We're to do a month's worth of work a day. So we done our best. We juggled it as best as we could. We worked the best of the land as quick as we could, but we had constraints there where farmers had slurry up through slats, and we couldn't go in good conscience and sow barley and leave cattle lying in slurry. Like we had to do a bit of everything. Hence why I'd say we're a little bit behind Paddy there in setting. We don't have our tillage work complete because we have to look after every side of the house. And like there's a good portion of silage there sitting waiting for us now, which should have been done last week.
And Patrick, down your side of the house, did you cope better, or you've a lot more gear on the go, or do you just or are you still under pressure to finish off some bits and pieces for people as well?
yeah, sure. Look, there's always pressure. It's a constant revolving. Like we started silage as well there last week, so we've a bit of that done as well. Um, but like it's just waiting for a spell of dry weather now. We'll be setting maize, preparing it. We've slurry going at the moment as well, still pipe slurry and tanker slurry, and what else? There's reseeding. Yeah, there's a lot still to do. Like yeah, the back end of the year has really affected us with the extra rain and stuff. No, We've caught up. Let's say when the weather broke, we just caught up with setting the grain, and now it's after breaking again. It gives us a chance to spread dung. There's a lot of dung going out in maize fields as well, because there's a heap of dung there this year, and there seems to be a few more inspections around where dung is being kept in farmyards as well. So we're getting extra calls about that, and they're smaller jobs probably, but they're very urgent all of a sudden. But yeah, there's little things like that in between then of silage is lined up now already. There's a lot of silage to cut there now when it does dry up. It'll be early enough here, yeah.
How, I suppose the question would be to both of you, maybe Padraig, you might answer it first. In terms of staff, you'd often hear trying to get people to, I suppose, man tractors are very complicated machines nowadays and various other different things. How are ye surviving for that? Is it more difficult every year, or how's that going for you?
I suppose it's when you take on extra work is when it becomes an issue. I suppose I'm lucky enough. I've a good line of staff, full-time staff here, and I've a few fellas that come in during the busy times. But like when you're looking for that, you're always short that one driver. So look, you're always on the lookout for that one driver. But it's if you don't keep them, if you don't keep them full-time now, you're wasting your time. They're not going to be there. They're going to have mortgages and wives, and it's trying to hold on. Before, I see it'd be a younger man's game, and once he'd get married, he'd leave the contracting and he'd go off and find some steady job somewhere. But I suppose we're trying to create an environment where it is a steady job, so that all that training doesn't go to waste on something else. And it's just trying to keep your staff happy. But like that, there's more obstacles down the line. You've the pension scheme coming in as well and stuff. So look, like there's a 3% pension scheme for next year, and I pay 1.5% and they pay 1.5%, but it's going to be 3% for the employer, and in this kind of business anyway is what it'll be.
Yeah, going to make more difficult. And Patrick, similar question to you.
Very similar answer to Padraig. We're trying to keep our staff more full-time on a permanent basis now than relying on seasonal staff. But something we've noticed now, where we used to have a big availability of farmer sons, as in the farmer would be at home farming, the son would be coming along behind them, and in a 20-year period, before he'd fully take over the reins and the father would retire, we'd usually get a lot of part-time labour out of them. But nowadays, the farm isn't profitable enough to sustain the two of them there, and they're now out working full-time, and we don't seem to have the availability of that part-time labour. And there seems to be, as Paddy was saying, a lot more coming down the line there with the pension scheme. It's becoming more and more expensive to actually have staff and carry staff now. And we really find this year especially, a lot of our customers don't have any sense of compassion for staff. Sure, why are you going home? It's only 10 o'clock at night. Can you not work through the night and finish mine? Or can you not work Sundays? Or you're not meant to have a life outside of what you're doing for that customer.
Yeah.
There's very little patience out there, especially in our area anyway.
Look, guys, I really appreciate your time. It's you have a very difficult job. I'd say it must be very difficult to juggle the ups and downs and the demands that are out there, and I don't envy you that. Along with the lines of trying to keep your staff on the go. So look, I certainly wish you all the best for the rest of the season, and maybe we might touch base with you maybe later in the year towards harvest to see how you're getting on. So guys, thanks very much.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
So that's it for this week's episode, and my thanks to Padraig and Patrick for joining me on the podcast. So as usual, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.